Hello and welcome once again to What's Out There, the paranormal podcast from the Out There Paranormal Group. And talking for you today, we have myself, Nigel, and
myself, Juliet.
And we also have somebody else.
We do.
We do indeed.
Another special guest.
Another great guest. What can we say? There's
What
so
can we
many
say,
things to say, isn't it?
Very talented lady.
Indeed. Scottish parapsychologist, a soon-to-be TV star,
psychology lecturer,
former psychology lecturer, and renowned parapsychologist. I've messed it up already. Evelyn Hollow, welcome to our podcast. I'm so sorry, I messed that intro up completely. So can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself, please? Thank you very much.
Sure. So I was a former psychology lecturer. I do still guest lecture occasionally, but not very often. I am a writer, paranormal psychologist, and now I mostly consult as an expert for television shows, podcasts, radio, things like that on the paranormal.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So here's a question to ask you to start with. You probably get asked it every single time you come onto these things. Why the paranormal? What got you into this field?
I think growing up as a kid, it wasn't really that unusual for me. It was very much talked about in my house. My mother had a fairly keen interest in it. And so I never really saw it as anything that strange. It was always paranormal things happen and just what are they? And so I had a pretty keen interest in it from a young age. I'm a big fan of all things, horror, strange, and then when I came into being really interested in physics as a kid, I started sort of looking at linking the two together. And then I went on to do a degree in psychology. And I was a forensic psychologist for a couple of years. But I was really subspecializing in interactions between quantum physics and human consciousness. And I started to see a link between paranormal and anomalous phenomena and consciousness and quantum physics and things like that. And then I found out that one of my supervising professors had a PhD in parapsychology, and I was like, that's a thing. Can I train in it? So I did, and then did a master's as well. And then, that's kind of how I ended up becoming a parapsychologist.
Wow, that's fascinating, isn't it? I love the fact that you mentioned something there that I want to go on to much later on, because there's an area of research you've undertaken that I'm completely fascinated, and I think you will be as well, with regards to quantum theory and all this kind of stuff.
That's something that I am truly fascinated in, and I've been sort of reading a lot about it, because I definitely think there's a link. Now, I know that you've talked about historically, sort of when you've previously said about your mum. Did your mum have any sort of psychic tendencies or anything as you were growing up? Did she sort of sense anything?
She's not a psychic or anything like that, but she definitely had, weird stuff happen. She's what I've previously referred to as a spirit talker, and that that's how I understand it personally, is that she had no control. Things would just happen to her, and they happened to her from a very young age. And growing up, I would remember her going to family funerals and things and coming back and having essentially had kind of visitations from things and not quite conversations with the deceased. That's a bit weird, but she did have things happen from a young age, and they were never really treated as abnormal. They were simply things that happened. And then I was looking at, okay, well, what is the science of that? Like, how is that possible? And she wasn't the only one. It wasn't until much later on, I think when I was getting ready to start filming Spooked Scotland, that my dad started talking about experiences that he'd had as well. And I was like,
really?
I didn't even know about it. He never talked about that stuff, but he did mention, one or two. And, I mean, it's hard without being there to ascertain what they did experience, but they're both, super practical, rational, kind of salt of the earth people, and they weren't, they're both keenly scientifically minded, and so it wasn't like they had an experience and then they instantly jumped to it being paranormal. And you always try and rule out everything else first. So for me, it's just applying the science of what is that experience.
Wow. Do you have any abilities yourself that you know of? Do you sort of pick up on things or anything like that? I know it's fun to throw at you when you're sort of, okay. Yeah. When you're going to admit to it or not, I don't know.
Yeah, there's, I don't know, there's stuff that's happened to both my sister. Things would always if things happened, they would normally happen to. My family is a very matriarchal family, and when things happened, they did. They were more likely to happen to me, my sister Rachel, and my mother Simone. And you would have strange things happen, and there were occasions where things would happen simultaneously, several cities apart, which were always really, really difficult to rationalize away.
Yeah.
But they're not. There is histories of things, but I think for me they were always hard to talk about because as a scientist you have a hard enough job. Trying to be a woman's a hell of a job alone.
Yeah,
never mind
absolutely.
trying to be a female scientist. Trying to be a female scientist in every other category that I'm assigned to. So I never actively talked about them because I just knew that people would be like, oh well,
This is the
you're
trouble. Yeah.
unhinged or whatever. Yeah,
It's a shame, really, because it's all valid, isn't it?
It's
when you're sort of looking
starting
into
to
this
change.
field, yeah.
It is starting to change, but we're not there yet.
Have you noticed any changes? Do people take you more seriously now? Or do you still find you've got that stigma where people think, oh, it's Evelyn, she's just a female lady, and then don't believe a word that you say?
Oh, the discrimination is unreal. I think growing up as when you have the misfortune of growing up female, you're kind of used to it anyway. And so when you're in the field of science, you have to work twice as hard for half as much all the time. And then also as a parapsychologist on top of that, I mean, when I was working as a experimental forensic psychology research assistant, there was no issue at all. So everybody takes you very seriously. And as soon as I swapped to parapsychology, one of the other lecturers outright said it was career suicide. And now I am the busiest person I know. It's career suicide. Is it? I haven't stopped working for however many years. But it's there's instantly an air of, is that a thing? And I think parapsychology as a whole is kind of not taken seriously, but you're still. It depends whether you're lecturing or doing work in a lab. You're still under scientific methodology. You're still peer reviewed, things like that. It is harder out in the field because we now have a lot of kind of like YouTubers and stuff, people who are interested in the paranormal, and that's great. I love it, and I love that everyone's interested in it. But what they're doing isn't always scientific, and it's hard for me to mediate because you're brought into things. And you have to still be, entertaining or you're on the screen or whatever, and still be present and still let them do their thing. But you have to remember that it's not like, I'm not in a lab. We're trying to do it as scientifically as possible, trying to rule out things, trying to be aware, but it's hard to do it under scientific conditions in the field. Absolutely. And so you've kind of got to look at where other academics will be like, oh, well, it's not scientific. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm not doing it in a lab. We're not submitting it to Nature for peer review. We're trying to make it as scientific as possible. So I see more now that my role is more kind of categorizing phenomena. Like if something happens, okay, what kind of phenomena is it? What category does it fit into? Like what is the difference between a ghost, a wraith, a poltergeist, things like that. So I'm designing lots of scales and categories and systems and things like that so that we can, and then from there we can kind of do it, because we really lack that in the field. People
we
lack
really
it.
We do, yeah. And everyone else has sort of weird opinions of what is what. I mean, I've heard people say to me that ghosts and spirits are two different things. I'm thinking, well, actually, I thought they were the same thing. And I said, well, no, a ghost is one that just sort of walks through a wall and ignores you, but whereas a spirit is one that will talk to you. I'm like, well, where did that come from? Because that's not something that I've heard. But then again, like you say, people are only putting their own labels onto things. And there's no sort of guidelines to say, well, actually, maybe if you did it like this, then we will be singing from the same hymn sheet.
We really need some guidance.
We do need some guidelines to actually sort of put down to say, this is what we should be doing with it.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I think and also just trying to, the first thing before you can even assess or classify phenomena is to categorize it. And I mean, starting with poltergeists, obviously working on Battersea poltergeists and things like that, we talk about what are the stages. I think previously there was 3, and then the sort of working one now is 5. And the system I designed, Hollow Scales, got 7, because as we started going through cases, I would find that there was really niche stuff that doesn't necessarily happen in every single one, but it happens in a majority, and sometimes it's overlooked. There's much more like intricate steps in them. So, we kind of started with that, but I've also been trying to work on a classification system for spirits that have colour tags. So you have white ladies and things like that. But Scotland has also got blue ladies, red ladies, orange ladies, things like that. And people ask you, well, what is that? What does that represent? So I've been working on that in between when I get a minute, everything else.
100 other things that you have to do, yeah.
Yeah, 100 other things that I have to do. But yeah, just even just trying to get a guide. I mean, I've been working on 3 manuscripts for years, and the kind of the kind of more academic one is kind of like what I'm calling a hauntology handbook, which is essentially a book of kind of like a Brereton's Phantasmagoria.
Yeah.
You're classifying mythology and things like this, but this is specifically looking at categorizing types of paranormal phenomena in a much more aggressive way.
Excellent. I mean, that's the ideal thing to have. It's something you can actually refer to and go to and say, look, this is it. Like you said with the other book, people are going to refer to it and say, well, look, you can find it in here. Here's a perfectly good explanation of it.
We need that. We
really
need
badly
that.
need that, yeah.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. Come on, Evelyn.
Whenever I get
it done.
You touched on earlier. You touched on Spooked Scotland, which we're looking forward to.
We're definitely looking forward to this.
We really are.
The trailer looks absolutely brilliant, I have to say.
Can you tell us what are we likely to expect from that, and what is it like working on it? Tell us all about it.
So, Spooked Scotland is due to come out at the end of the month. I think the first episode airs 27th of May on Channel Really, and then it's immediately available to stream on Discovery Plus. And I believe provisionally that it's also should be available in places like America and things like that on Discovery Plus. It's going to be it's 10 episodes, I think, off the top of my head. And lots of different locations in Scotland. Myself, Gail Porter, Chris Fleming, and Ryan O'Neill. And so we all kind of have different roles. Gail Porter's obviously presenting. Chris has been hired as an American, I guess medium, I guess is the way to describe it. And Ryan is from Haunted Scotland. He is very much the tech guy, he's got the equipment and investigating. And then myself as a parapsychologist, just looking to kind of assess the mythology and history of the locations. What are we potentially experiencing? And then also when stuff is happening, trying to rule out what we're maybe experiencing or what might be happening. Or if something is happening, how is that possible? So I'm kind of the consultant essentially. But no, it was great fun to film. Tern, our production company, were just absolutely class. I've ended up being really good friends with most of them.
That's lovely.
Absolute banter. Had a great time filming, and it was great. The locations that we went to as well were really interesting. There's places where sometimes film crews have never been allowed before.
That's what you need, isn't it?
Somewhere
that's
different,
completely untouched.
Yeah.
So you can go in with a blank slate and just exactly
not
see.
the same old that you see on every program.
Yeah. That's the bit I love.
There was definitely, there's some really lavish locations as well. I believe anyway that the first episode is Broddick Castle. That is actually the last one we filmed.
Wow.
And it's just the most insanely beautiful castle I've ever been in. It's incredibly well preserved. It is the Buckingham Palace of Scottish castles.
Wow.
And just being on an island and I think on the final night, we film overnight for some of the episodes, and the final night, it's raining and all the lights are off in this insanely huge castle.
Wow.
And I think the final room that we ended up in is incredibly beautiful. And there's a picture I posted on Instagram, I think, from when we wrapped. That was our last episode and we wrapped, and I got to play piano. It's like a couple 100 years old. That was gifted to the lady of the house on her 21st birthday, and I got to play it. And I was just sitting there going, how do I get paid for this? Is this my job? That happens a lot, I think, as a parapsychologist, especially when you're working on lots of really exciting, cool stuff, and you're like, I can't believe I get paid to do this. I'm just really excited all the time.
But you put in the work for it.
It is the best job in the world.
I mean, you put in the work beforehand. All the sort of education stuff you've had to do to get yourself to this point. I mean, it's paying off for you now, and it's right that it should do that. And it's interesting people like yourself that we really should be turning to in this field.
Well, we need more ladies in the field.
We do need more ladies. I tend to find
do.
the ladies talk a lot more sense than the blokes. Seriously, no, it's true. I'm quite happy to hold my hands up and admit that. They do.
But it's predominantly male dominated. That's the
Sadly
thing. So
it's
lovely, Evelyn, to have you doing this kind of stuff.
I think the Yeah, the vast majority of most scientific fields, not all of them, but a big chunk of them were or still are, especially STEM, is male dominated. But I think there's only a handful of parapsychologists in the whole of the UK, and I can only name one other female parapsychologist, which would be Caroline, who's at Edinburgh University. She's like the head of the Costa Parapsychology unit. She's top of her field, but she's the only other one I can name off the top of my head. And I think especially there's an intersection between the paranormal and and class and things like that as well. It interacts with a lot of socioeconomic things.
Yes.
So if we have everyone in the field simply being, say, middle class, cis het, male, whatever, they're only going to have one viewpoint or experience. Yeah. So you don't get to experience people with other religious backgrounds or belief, but other socioeconomic backgrounds. I grew up lower working class. I also grew up female. I myself am personally pagan, but I came to that much later on through sort of different beliefs and, and things like that. And then, Scotland, being Scottish and coming from that culture and intersections of, language and history of oppression and genocide. And so where does that all interact with belief? Because I think class is definitely the one that comes up the most, because if somebody who was upper class in a big, beautiful Georgian townhouse, said to you, oh, like, we've got a ghost, and they tell you, everyone would, takes it fairly seriously. But if someone in a council estate says they saw something, they're like, did you? There's definitely this kind of class, right, of well, paranormal belief is for uneducated, poor people who don't know any better, and people who are sort of wealthy, educated, well-to-do are much more intelligent and much more rational. And there's definitely a thing of discrimination, and the same with women as well. Yeah, the same thing of because women are more likely to believe in paranormal aspects, so they're taken less seriously when things happen. And that's it's an uphill struggle.
It really is, Speaking from experience,
well, I was going to say,
completely.
I don't have any sort of education in this sort of field at all. I'm not a psychologist or anything. I did anthropology as a degree, so I'm sort of more into that sort of side of things. And you just basically sort of A-levels and stuff like that, didn't you?
I just bounce around doing psychic bits and pieces.
But does it make us any less valid because we're interested in what we do? No, because we're passionate about what we do, so we learn an awful lot more about sort of certain things, and we're always looking to learn more as well. Is my point less valid than somebody who's got a degree, a science degree, for instance?
Not. Absolutely not. I don't think class should. But you're absolutely right in what you say.
Yeah.
It makes, and I think that concept really needs to change. Because I've spoken to people from, like you have, all walks of life, and their experiences are no different, and they shouldn't be any different. It doesn't matter what class you are. It should all be taken seriously. And that's one thing I loved about Danny Robbins' Uncanny podcast and series that he did, because that was people from all different walks of life talking people. And we've obviously got the Uncanny community on the back of that, where we come together and we talk occasionally about things, and it's absolutely fantastic because nobody is dissing other people's perspectives or point of view. There's no judgment, and it's lovely that we all accept each other's views. We've all got different views, and we're all very accepting of it, because none of us really know the answers yet. No. I'm sure it will come eventually.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you actually undertake investigations yourself? If you get time to actually do you actually go out with a team and investigate? Or do you tend to be called in on things?
No, so I get called in. So I don't I don't do ghost hunting and things like that. I get called in basically as a consultant for shows where there's already a case or phenomena has already happened normally, and then I'm called in to kind of assess what has happened and and to work on it. I think working on Spooked Scotland was the first time I was kind of actively on investigations, because we had like Ryan with us, whose job is to do that. He has his own team. They're great. They're fully kitted out to do it. And then you've got Chris is there doing, being Chris, doing his own thing. He's kind of got a different take on it. And then Gail is there to present, and also just to be an outsider, because she's got no kind of skin in the game. So she's got to just be there as an individual, a third party, just to outright kind of guide it and be your own person and potentially experience it. And then I'm there to kind of go, okay, well, what is happening, and assess it and categorize it and talk through it. So I'm kind of curating essentially. But no, I don't normally work in the field. I do host I host private tours in Edinburgh, where I walk around and take people to locations. But yeah, it's more looking at the kind of history and mythology of places. Rather than active investigations. I mean, I like being on them. I had a great time on Spooked Scotland doing it, but it's just slightly not with my field. I'm definitely the consultant that comes in to assess it.
That's what we need, though.
And
we need more of this. We need more of you.
Yeah, but then it's up to the teams themselves then to actually follow some sort of guidelines to actually what they do. Because if we just go out and say, "Woo, wow, ghost is a demon," look at that, wow, like you do, or stick some great big like clickbait thing on YouTube to get people to click on and come and have a look at it, there's no point. You need to be recording evidence and putting things down, and then hand it over to somebody like yourself and say, "This is what we have. Record it as carefully as you can." And then you've got that chance then to look at it and say, "Well, okay, it could be this, it could be that." You know, I think that's the thing, isn't it? There is...
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
I mean, I'm doing at the moment, I'm taking apart the Room 611 thing from Uncanny. I've listened to all 3 episodes, written down all the evidence, and I'm writing it up as an investigation article for Haunted Magazine. And it's amazing when you look at it, the things that happen, but linking them all together. But then it's like you said, it's like digging down into it and thinking, well, okay, this happened. What about that? Why did that happen? What can you put it down to? And the thing I like about the Batsy, Poltergeist and Uncanny is your take on things. You don't take what the skeptics say for granted. You will sort of stand up to them.
Brilliant.
Do you find that sometimes...
I wear size 7 boots. Like, that's always my... Yeah. I think it's the attitude of... most people, they do want to believe. They'd love to be proven wrong. Kieran says that a lot. He'd love to be proven wrong. They're obviously really keenly interested in it, but I think there is definitely a niche where it's fine. I was doing an interview this morning and somebody asked me that. They were like, it's really odd because we Googled through there's only a handful of parapsychologists, and the ones we looked through, all of them are like hardcore skeptics. And so I am one of a few, or certainly the only one I can think of off the top of my head that wants to, I've got to go through and rule out what everything is. I don't automatically believe, but I tend to, there are some times where you get people, and no matter how much evidence you give them, even if they're there themselves and they experience it and you've ruled out everything else, they still will not believe. And that to me is like bad science, because nowhere else would we have that much evidence and interaction and still continue to ignore it. You would always follow that as a line of inquiry and go, okay, well, if it is this, then let's look at it and then start ruling out stuff and work down. And instead, no matter how much you give them, they won't look at that line of inquiry. And I'm like, that's not what science is supposed to be doing. So I find that really strange. And I think I don't, I go into everything with an open mind, and I would say at least half to 2/3 of the time you can probably rule it out roughly as other things. But once I've ruled everything else out, if what I am left with is the paranormal, then I have to investigate that. Like, surely that is my job.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I do definitely lean more into that. But I think also, you have to have thick skin, because being someone who is more likely to advocate for it being the paranormal, and being a female scientist is there's lots of things that you'll have to just kind of learn to deal with, because that people will just say okay, and then they'll just talk nonsense about you, but I mean, I have grown up making myself I was doing an interview the other day and I said, I am not nice, I am aggressive. And because you have to be. Yeah. So otherwise, like, I won't let, when you grow up and you're used to people, ignoring you or talking over you or whatever. And I'm like, son, I grew up in a trailer park. I wear size 7 boots and I know how to bar fight. Like, you don't want to go toe to toe with me. But you've got to, because otherwise other people don't want to talk about their experiences or say anything, because they're going to get ripped apart by a bunch of people who are really, people who have also not had those life experiences, people who are like kind of upper middle class smug men on the internet, where we're like, well, it's simply not that, and and I'm like, but you've never had the lived experiences of any of these people, so how can you possibly? You'll say, well, that simply doesn't happen. I'm like, but you don't have that lived experience, so how
said
can you
that to you
possibly say
earlier,
that
didn't
doesn't
I?
You can't
happen?
just prejudge, you know.
That's
How
what I
can
was
you
saying to
prejudge
you.
someone?
No.
You know,
Yeah.
listen to what the person's saying. Oh, like you said, but then it comes to that situation, well, they're below me, so whatever they say is not valid, so I'm not going to listen.
It's nuts.
And it happens across all sort of things. I remember I was listening to one of your interviews when he said about third world countries and tribalism and stuff like that, where they sort of put to one side because they're backward, you know, because they don't know what they're talking about. But I mean, the case of the matter is, actually, they're an awful lot closer to it. Because they're closer to nature, they're closer to natural things, they're closer to this sort of stuff. It's more in their beliefs. So when they come out and say something, actually they're a lot more believable than people here that say something because they're a lot closer to it. And I think these things are sadly thrown to one side.
Definitely,
aren't they?
they're yeah, and their cultures
Yeah.
are older as well. So if you look at medicine and things like that, you'll have people that will have been using and certain things for hundreds and hundreds of years, and their understanding of plants and herbalism and things is incredible. And they know things that we might not know. And so there's also really remote cultures that we just don't know enough about. And so the attitude is that, oh, they're unscientific and they're unenlightened. And I'm like, and they're this and they're that. And I'm like, what you actually just mean is that you haven't colonized them yet, because you're stamping your version of what you think is valid, what you think is scientific, and what you think is rational on another culture. And I can guarantee you it's because you're from a first world place and you're white, but you think that people with different coloured skin who behave differently to you are unenlightened and don't do things. There's lots of dog whistle racism and paranormal stuff that I come across all the time. And it's definitely this attitude of other cultures are unenlightened, and I'm like, why? Because England never stuck a flag in it and went, that's ours now.
Yeah.
I just don't believe it.
I will say very quickly, if you hear a meow, it's not us, it's my cat.
It's the cat. She likes to get on the act.
We're not purring and we're not meowing.
We're not ringing a little bell pretending to be a cat. So
yeah, she likes
she
Nigel,
likes to,
so she
joins
suddenly
in.
appear.
So
That's
what else have we got, kiddo?
So, I mean, you've talked about ruling everything out, and then you're very open to this kind of stuff. I mean, obviously, you've talked about your family and growing up, and the fact that your parents both had experiences. So have you had any particular experiences yourself that really stand out, sort of growing up or anything like that, which has really made you challenge your thought process on it?
I think for me, I having not talked about them for years, and then I think when we were doing Battersea Poltergeist Live and we were touring, there was one night where somebody had submitted a question specifically, I think, asking me about an experience, and my brain immediately went to, I mean, there was lots, but the first one that really jarred me, really stuck with me, and I talked about it live on stage, and Danny and I talked about it afterwards, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to talk about this at some point, and and started discussing it, and I mentioned it. Somebody else asked about it this morning on another call, and so it's kind of the one that I go back to. There are lots of weird things that happen that I will probably take me some more time to process before I'm able to talk about them. But the first one I will talk about. So when I was a teenager, somewhere I think I was 15, but I could have been as young as 13. I came into town. So I'm from Livingston in West Lothian, just outside Edinburgh, and I got a bus into town. I'm 90% sure I was skipping school to go and buy comic books. And so I'm sitting in Hunter Square in Edinburgh, and it's lunchtime, so there's lots of office people eating their lunch and drinking coffee and stuff, sitting on the steps. And in the middle of this big square, there's a big group of pigeons, and there's a lady feeding pigeons who looks quite dishevelled. She's probably a bag lady or a homeless person. Just feeding the pigeons, fairly normal. And every so often, I glance up from what I'm reading and was watching her feeding them. And eventually at one point I look up and one is kind of eating right out of her hand, basically. And she sort of picks it up and lifts it close to her face, and she's sort of talking to it and things. And I'm like, oh, she's kind of like the lady from Home Alone that's always feeding the birds in Central Park. I was like, oh, she must come here all the time. She's literally like talking, like the pigeon is really chill. Like she's obviously been here a lot. And so she's holding this pigeon up to her face, sort of talking away to it. And then I look down and I glance back up, and she's sort of leaning the pigeon towards her, and I'm like, is she going to kiss the pigeon? A bit weird. And then so she's leaning it towards her face like she's going to kiss it, and I'm like, so I obviously stop what I'm doing to watch, and then at the last minute she opens her mouth, and I mean her jaw unhinged like a snake, and she bit the head off the pigeon.
Seriously?
She put the whole pigeon. Literally, she lifted it towards her face very slowly, and I thought she was going to kiss it. And then at the last second, she opened her mouth, like in a natural width, put the whole bird in her face and bit down. And I mean, she bit down into it like you
like
bite
kind of
into a
Aussie
donut.
style biting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I obviously yelped. I went, just for a second, literally just clasped my hands to my face, and then, and then sort of, and then when I opened, my eyes were only shut for a second, maybe 2 seconds, just instinctively, sort of cringed back. And then as I opened my eyes, she was gone.
Oh my goodness.
She was gone. And the weirdest thing was, all the birds were still there. Do you know if you go near a big group of pigeons, at the very least they'll sort of flutter.
Yeah.
They might not fly all the way, but they'll definitely flutter back. They didn't. All of them were still there, like nothing had happened. Wow. They were all completely still, and the thing is, they were still eating. She'd had like bread or seed or peanuts or something in her hand, something small in her hand, and they were still eating it off the ground. That's how. Like I know she was still there. Because the birds were still, like, the birds had not moved, and they were still eating whatever this stuff was off the ground. It wasn't like they were picking it, debris. It was visibly still on the ground. They were still picking at handfuls of it. Birds hadn't moved, but she was gone.
And there was no way she could have run.
That's mad.
No, it's a Hunter Square is a fairly big square, and so you go in the front bit where the Starbucks is, and there's the church, Tronkirk to the left side, and then you go down a set of steps, and on the left hand side there's like kind of like a raised pyramid bit with all the steps on it. That's where everyone sits. So I was sitting there, and there's this big open square bit, and there's a post box and stuff, and the street is completely open. So, I mean, I had my eyes shut for a second, 2 seconds. Enough time for her to, at maximum, stand up, maybe. But other than that, and she had, stuff. And just, the weirdest thing was I looked around me, obviously, and nobody else reacted. Everyone else was just sitting, drinking their coffee or on their phones or eating their sandwiches. Like, I looked around, and it was like nobody else had seen it. I think a few... No, like I think a few people immediately to my left and right sort of looked at me because obviously I yelped and kind of shouted back. They just sort of were looking at me, but nobody else. Like I was looking around thinking surely everyone else just seen what I seen, and nobody else was bothered. And so I came home and I said, I came home and I think I remember saying to my mum, she was washing dishes in the kitchen, I was drying them, and I think I said like, I think I saw a lady eat a bird and barked in it, like, the kind of thing. And I remember my mum saying to me something along the lines of like she was here but she wasn't there, or she was there but she wasn't here. Do you know what I mean, like that? And so, but that one stayed with me for a long time because it wasn't like something sort of passive happened, or I heard some noises or spooky stuff kind of happened. This was broad daylight, middle of the day in Hunter Square. It was busy, and I watched a woman who is as real as you and I are feed a bunch of birds and then eat one and then vanish in a second. And I there was shit.
So I mean, did you do any research or anything? I mean, was there anything that had happened at that particular place historically?
No, I mean, I've never, Tronkirk Edinburgh is the most haunted city on earth, and she's the city of ghosts. So if you start digging into stuff, you're always going to find it. But it never occurred to me to like Google pigeon lady at Hunter Square.
Did it not? I'm surprised.
Nothing, no, it didn't, but nothing, nothing ever kind of, Tronkirk has its own kind of history of things like that. But the thing is, she wasn't old looking as in like Victorian or Tudor or anything, or Middle Ages. She looked fairly modern in that she looked like the average person you might walk past on a street. Edinburgh has quite a lot of homeless people, and she looked no more different than that, as in she looked like the jacket she had on was a waterproof, not maybe quite an anorak, but like a large waterproof. And the trousers she had on were like basic kind of black slacks, maybe not quite leggings, but that sort of loose thing. And she had trainers on, do you know? So, like, just kind of like, they were quite dirty. They look maybe similar to Skechers, I guess. That sort of thing. So she looked, there was no, that's why I never thought anything of it, because right until the last second, because she just looked
normal person. Like
normal.
you said,
She's from here,
down
so.
now, just feeding the bird. It's
Yeah,
the fact that
from this time. So
it's odd. It turned up, fed the birds, and picked one up. Just is she there for that purpose, just to grab one and eat it and then go? I mean, some kind of weird interdimensional
how could
being.
she go?
It's just bonkers,
that's
isn't it?
the thing.
That's a brilliant story. That's absolutely fantastic.
Unless it's one of those things, like something that I'm fascinated in, unless it's like, you know, quantum theory and parallel dimensions.
Someone from parallel universe.
Overlapping.
Yeah.
And, because that fascinates me. Yeah. What if there is some kind of time glitch and we do have these dimensions, if you like, that do overlap for whatever, because even with paranormal experiences and things like that, they only seem to happen for a minute, 2 minutes, whatever. They don't go on for days or weeks or hours. They're always very, very quick. So it makes me wonder whether it is some kind of dimensional time shift or overlap that is causing. I mean, me being a psychic, I'm still interested and fascinated by the science behind this, because I want to know how it all works. And
why do you hear these weird things in your head or see these strange
things?
Well,
this is why I love what you do, because you're bringing sense to it, and it's fantastic what you do. I love it. You
operate sort of, it's not really in that field as such, but you look at, it's a word I can't say, consciousness. Yeah, and
consciousness.
Is it quantum mechanics of it, or looking at consciousness as more of a sort of molecular thing rather than
Yeah, so my working theory, when I was doing my undergrad, my working theory, so we're always trying to solve the hard problem of consciousness. It's psychology's greatest unanswered question. And in my early 20s, I started to believe, okay, well, what if consciousness is not, I'll say molecular, but it's technically the wrong term. What if it's like particles? It's very, very small. And so, if it's built up of much smaller things or individual properties and things like that, but they're very small, then it wouldn't be governed by classical physics. It would be governed by the quantum. And once it's governed by the quantum, once you apply quantum physics to it, a bunch of stuff that didn't make sense suddenly starts to make sense, including how things can blip in and out of existence. We know that happens in the quantum world. Even time itself, how that behaves, and things collapsing from superpositions, and the ability, when we're even still now, we're still behind, because we're starting to look at neutrinos and quarks and things that behave in ways that violate all other laws of science. So things that look like magic to us are not. And so once I started to understand that, I started to go, well, hang on a minute, because a bunch of stuff in the paranormal kind of starts to make sense. And if you assume that consciousness is governed by the quantum, then if consciousness can survive past the human body, the physical, actual, our body, if it can survive past that and it's governed by quantum, suddenly, things like ghosts or poltergeists or whatever suddenly start to kind of become possible, and they start to make sense. And so I was working on that for a long time. I was working on this kind of like Hollow's theorem of kind of like the science of ghosts. But we, and at the time I mentioned it to one of my professors, and he was like, no, I don't think there's any governance for consciousness potentially being molecular or particulate or whatever. And then lo and behold, like a couple of years later, I think I was in the final year of my degree, a couple of scientists did research using caterpillars. So caterpillars, when they go into a cocoon, they completely liquefy. They have no body. I mean, they liquefy down to the smallest possible parts. There is no brain. There is no heart, anything like that. It's pure goo. It's literally goo, and then it reassembles itself and it emerges a butterfly. So what they did was they took caterpillars, and if memory serves me, they sort of basically kind of like trained them in a maze, or they trained them to remember things. They basically behavioural conditioning. They got them to associate certain things with food or solve certain problems or behave in certain ways.
Yeah.
And then, Yeah.
Yeah.
So Pavlovian conditioning, essentially. And then they got into their cocoons, they liquefied, and then when they came out as a butterfly, they did the same test and the butterfly would remember. So that means that it was not like, right? So it's not like it liquefied down and then it just, something grows out of the liquid and it's two separate things. The butterfly has the same consciousness as it did when it's a caterpillar. I know it's like the ship of Theseus experiment where the body is completely different, but the consciousness is the same. And I was like, motherfucker, I told you it was going to happen 4 years ago. Like I was like, I went to a professor and said I believed that, and he basically laughed in my face. And then 4 years later, someone was presenting at a conference with that, and I was like, God damn it, we've done it. But so there's a lot more tests and stuff to be done. But that, what from there, and I mean that was a while ago now, and now we're at the point of that's at the same year that we thought that what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, quantum entanglement, was only a theory. And now not only do we know it's real, there's the research unit in China has got it down to being able to do it with stuff almost visible to the human eye. Like they're not just doing it with small, tiny quantum, governed particles. They're now doing it to the point where we're almost at the point where you're going to be able to do it with stuff that's visible to the human eye. That's where we are now.
Wow.
So I think there's going to be in the next, 10 years, obviously with COVID and everything else and the general late stage capitalism and everything else. And most of all the, global warming and stuff, there's some other areas of science might get slowed down because we need to focus on bigger things. But hopefully in the next decade, we're going to see some really incredible stuff.
Do you know what?
See,
it's just, do you know what? At long
bloody
last. That's all I've got to say.
It's what you're looking for. You want the answers. You want to be able to sort of say, well, look, could it possibly be this? And then you've got that working theory.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere? Have you sort of recorded this in sort of note form or anything that people can actually access and look at, or?
So for me, I was going to look at doing the stuff for my master's dissertation, but I ended up working on something else. But generally, I've done guest lectures on this, like where this kind of all interacts, and I've done guest lectures on it, but I don't think any of them were recorded. But now that lectures are kind of, we can do stuff in person again, kind of hoping to do more, but it is kind of in the manuscript I was working on, the hauntology one, and it is going to be talked about in that, because before you even get into categorizing phenomena, I'm obviously going to have to talk extensively about what I even believe some of this phenomena is, and so I am going to talk about it in that. But I should also probably I do get asked about it a lot, so at some point I think, who was it that approached me? Someone approached me tail end of last year in December to write 2 articles for the Journal for the Society of Psychical Research. And I think one of them was going to be on that. So I was going to publish an article in that journal about it. But then everything kind of went into chaos. My dad died, and then I was in the middle of filming and stuff. So there's loads of writing work that should have been out or done at the end of last year, and all of it has been pushed. Between filming and podcasting, I haven't been able to write anything for about 6 months. So, but I am hoping to kind of get back to writing in papers and stuff, because it's the easiest way to distribute information is just to let people read it. So yeah, hopefully we'll kind of get back on track with the writing work. But yeah, at the moment, mostly kind of audio and working on cases.
Yeah, brilliant.
Superb. So I mean, you've touched on we've all touched on Uncanny with Danny Robbins and the Battersea Poltergeist that you did, and you talked extensively with Shirley, didn't you? Wasn't that live? You interviewed Shirley live on BBC. Am I right?
Wait, so I did a piece on. I was on this morning, ITV's This Morning, with Shirley. So they interviewed her, and then in the second segment they talked to me just as a parapsychologist, and they had a bunch of live people kind of get in touch with the show and have me assess some things. Shirley also came out to the Battersea show, the kind of crown show of Battersea Poltergeist Live. That was I think it was sold out. It was certainly rammed. in Battersea on Halloween, and we had her in the royal box, and she got to take questions live from the audience. And Shirley and I do still keep in touch.
wow.
We've Skyped a couple of times or used Zoom or whatever, and she emails me regularly and things like that and keeps in touch. But yeah, I think I spoke to her the other week actually. But yeah, we keep in touch, and I've got her daughter on Facebook
what was
and
it
things like that.
talking
So yeah,
to somebody that was right at the centre of this case? Because a lot of the time, you know, we have stories and people have passed away or you know, moved on, and it just must be fascinating to be able to have somebody that experienced that phenomena that you can actually talk to.
Yeah, it was actually the focus of the whole thing as well, because it did all revolve around her, didn't it? So
it was really unusual, because in these kind of historic cases, everyone's dead, so you can't talk to any of these people. This was the first really big. I mean, Battersea Poltergeist is just the holy grail of poltergeist cases. It's absolutely insane, and Shirley still being alive and us being able to talk to her, it's an absolute gift, because you don't have that. So you take a lot on assumption, or you're constantly digging through notes, and obviously we had Harold Chibbett's notes, but to be able to actually go and ask Shirley was just unheard of. It's a really unusual case. And so that was great. And I think for a lot of people, regardless of whether they believed or their own theories on kind of what happened, like when you talk to Shirley, about it, it's regardless of like what you believe happened or didn't happen, all of this is very much real for Shirley. And I always say that regardless of whether you believe or don't believe, the trauma for a person is real. Whether it's a ghost or a poltergeist or people at it or environmental factors or whatever, the trauma is real, and you have to treat it as such. It's a phenomenal case to work on. Shirley's class is really, really interesting. She's quite canny, and and I got to meet lots of her family and stuff as well. So I think it must be really weird for Shirley as well. I always think that to be, I think she's in her 70s, I think, and in her 70s, and to suddenly be, on This
That's
Morning
massive.
and having, a viral podcast made about her that was #1 in the world for several months, and then being in the royal box, and just that must be
that's
really,
an incredible
really
thing
bizarre.
to be involved with, though.
Really
the
bizarre.
Podcast. I mean, that is
cool. Yeah,
it's started the ball rolling on so many things.
Yeah.
I mean, whether or not there'll be copycats to do the same sort of thing, I don't think they're going to be able to match it, because of the way it's been done. It was so clever. The fact that you had the sort of drama element of it, then you had yourself and you had Kieran and you had Danny telling the story. You managed to speak to all these people. You had Shirley on there. I mean, it's the weird thing is, I remember listening to another podcast saying it's one of those poltergeist cases that's like swept under the carpet. You're looking through it and it's suddenly, well, it's not there. It's not like Enfield, where it's in your face and you can find it straight away. It's like, wow, look at it. And the things that happen. And you're trying to sort of say, well, there could be that, it could be this, it could be that. But there's so many things in that case that you cannot explain. You were saying about, one podcast you were saying about the noises, and the actual level of the noise was loud enough to get people out in the street. I mean,
that's nuts, isn't it?
It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
We recreated that in the theatre, because Danny did an experiment where he kind of worked out like how loud would it have to be, a noise have to be for your neighbours to hear it. I mean, really clearly, during the point where it feels like it's on their wall. So we estimated that it's about 100 decibels. It's about the point where neighbours could go, okay, we can really hear that. That sounds theoretical to people, but we did it live in every theatre. One of the pieces that we opened with was we played just a simple banging noise, and we started it about 40, 50 decibels, and then we upped it and upped it and upped it. We upped it to 100 decibels, and I cannot describe to you how loud 100 decibels of banging actually is. We were in theatres that see, more than 1,000 people, sometimes 5,000 people, and the place shook. The walls shook. It was absolutely insane. And you could see people being like, we're not talking about your neighbours banging on the wall or, someone slamming a car door or whatever. We are talking about, there's a point where, Ethel, grandma, would say, they had to say, it's like the Blitz, because that's what it was like. It is the whole house shakes. So short of hiring like a JCB or something and having it knock through a wall, there is physically no way
That's
for
what makes
any
it so
human being
fascinating, because I
to
know they
create
tried to
that.
blame the brother, didn't they, for it as well? But I think, I mean, wasn't it right? He wasn't
Yeah.
even there
Oh, God,
for some
yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a job
He
doing
was
that
in
from Australia, wouldn't we?
yeah.
Yeah, that'd be quite
He
clever.
was in Australia.
And the sound about her being like the Fox sisters
that's
and
my
clicking her
favourite,
toes
yeah.
or clicking her
I keep
fingers to
going
make the
back to
noises.
that.
And you think, well,
It's nuts.
you can't do that.
No.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, if Shirley could click her toes at 100 decibels, that would be
Exactly.
far
Really
more
quite
interesting
impressive.
She
than
might
it
end
being a
up in Oz.
poltergeist. That is, yeah, insane. And yeah, I love it was the brother is like my favourite theory, because he moved away to Australia halfway through the case, and I was like, guys.
Your theory on the whole thing,
I don't
after
know.
you've talked to her, you've done your research and all the rest of it, would you put it down to a paranormal experience or something else? What are your real thoughts on that whole case?
So I think, I definitely believe it's paranormal in nature. I don't believe that all the phenomena is paranormal, because the case spanned 10 years. So it would be weird for there not to be stuff that happened. And because you've been enduring that for so long, it all gets lumped in together. And I definitely expect there to be human interaction, because again, it's 10 years. If you're experiencing that level of extreme, just trauma and violence for 10 years and nobody believes you, of course you're going to start playing into it or adding things to it, like kind of happened in like the Enfield case and things like that. How would you not? And other people will probably interact with it as well. I fully expect that. Fully expect that.
I mean,
But to me, I don't think all of it's paranormal in nature. I think there's points where there's human error or human interaction or human embellishment, and I think some of the phenomena got lumped together. But I think the core of it, the core of it, or the kind of central phenomena is paranormal in nature.
Fantastic.
I do believe so.
So what have you got lined up next for us? What's coming up in your world?
So I've got Spook Scotland comes out at the end of this month on Channel Relay and Discovery Plus. First episode goes out May 27th, and I've also got a lot more podcast interviews coming out. I think you were number 4 this week alone. It's been busy. So I think there's a few coming out. So there's maybe half a dozen or so this month. There's press coming out for Spook Scotland. There's like interviews for newspapers and things as well. We are also, Danny, myself and Kieran are also performing at the Hay Festival at the end of the month. So down in Wales, or on the border of Wales and England. We're at the Hay Festival. I'm still trying to kind of find out, because I don't know if we're recording it or not. Obviously, Simon's going to be with us, Simon Barnard from Bafflegab. So I don't know if we're recording it and then it's going to be put out, or if it's going to be streamed or what. And so we're going to be doing that. So we're going to be doing like a special episode of Uncanny Live. I don't think we're quite know what we're working on yet, but it's going to be an Uncanny special live from a festival, basically. But yeah, I need to find out if that's being... I'd assume it's being recorded, but especially if Simon's going to be there and stuff. So I assume so, and then it'll get released maybe online as a special. But yeah, I do need to find out. But I mean, I'll post plenty of stuff and whatnot on my Instagram and Twitter and whatnot, Instagram stories, so people can kind of watch what we're doing behind the scenes. But it'll be fun to do at a festival. For podcasts, I feel like, with our kind of team from Batpult and Uncanny, we do some really unusual stuff, because we're a podcast who ended up doing like a live theatre tour, and now we're performing live at a festival, and that's kind of unheard of for podcasts. So it's a kind of weird kind of branching out of the format, but yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and it's gonna be a busy summer. Lots of shows and interviews and things coming up. So
one more thing I want to ask you.
I
follow you on Instagram. Okay. You put pictures up and you put some fantastic writing underneath some of them, which is all your own work. You're not only just a factual writer, you're a fiction writer as well. Are you at some stage going to share some more of that? Because Evelyn is so
please
good.
Please
you are such a good writer. I mean, it really sort of sucks you in. It's absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. I think before I was a parapsychologist, I was a writer, and I've been a published author from quite a young age. And I had a writing blog. I was a resident author for a couple of different publications, Esoteric Design, things like that. And I wrote mostly, and then when I came into parapsychology, it kind of went to the back burner a bit because I was working so much on this stuff. I started, I've got 3 manuscripts, and there is a non-fiction manuscript, obviously the kind of hauntology one, but there's also one that's kind of a blend of fiction, non-fiction, and there is a fiction manuscript as well. And they're all collections of short stories. I've been working on them on and off for years, but just because my work schedule is so chaotic, I binge work on something for like a week, and then I get sick of it or something, and then I suddenly am waylaid for like 4 months on another project. But I've also been, I work with another writer, Will Christopher Bear, who his grander title is always says that I'm his muse, and so I work editing and kind of reading through his work and things like that. And we, we'll probably end up maybe working on stuff together at some point. But it's one of those things where I want to do more. I get asked about it a lot. People always ask me if I'd ever want to open like a Patreon or what's the other one? What's the one that Chuck Palahniuk uses?
Yeah,
it's
like
like
more literal one. I
like
remember you saying
Patreon, but
on
not.
Insta
It's
which
more
one
for
would be the
writers,
best.
whatever
It
that
depends
is.
what you want to do, whether you want to like use audio and visual with it as well.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes reading a blank word is good, but it's also nice then to listen to someone reading it as well. So
I think, when I'm kind of posting on Instagram, it's just because I used to be president of the Writers' Society at QMU, and I was for several years. And the classes I taught writing classes at festivals and universities and things. And I had my own specific methodology called the cold press method, which was so that you rapid improve your writing so you don't have to edit. I very, very rarely redraft. And so when I'm doing that on Instagram, even though it's just me posting stuff and then writing underneath, I'm doing it in that methodology and in that format, and it kind of stops my brain from going stagnant. Because if you don't write for a couple of months and then you try to sit down, it's horrific. It's really difficult. So doing that, even though it's just, me just sort of I'm just sort of talking about my life and things like that, or my experiences, I'm kind of writing in prose format. It keeps my brain thinking like that and in that loop. But yeah, lots of people ask for Patreon or more writing stuff or whatever, and it is something that I have looked at, and I always tell myself I don't have time to take on another project, but if I did that, even if I was posting something once a week or something, it would probably keep me into writing more. And lots of people ask about
not
it,
that
so
try and twist your arm or anything. I just find it's so wonderful. It's so descriptive. I mean, when you read through it, just short little bits, and I'm now like, oh my God, that's absolutely brilliant. So that's really, really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking to do more with it. I will definitely. One of my main
add it to the list.
There's so much to do. Is looking into doing add it to the list. The list is the length of a Leonard Cohen song at this point. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous.
So, whereabouts can we actually sort of access you? I know you've got your own website, so we can plug that. You're active on. Sorry, Karen, didn't you?
So you've got so you've got so there's a website, www.evelynhollow.com. You've got Instagram as well, Evelyn Hollow, Twitter _Evelyn Hollow. That's kind of the main 3 places where I am. Twitter is kind of more, interacting with everyone that I work with. So there's the Uncanny community on there, Bat Poke community, promoting stuff that, me and Danny are up to, me and Gail are up to television. So that's kind of more active discussion. Like if people need to speak to me or tag me and things, Twitter is the best place for that. Instagram is mostly just me posting kind of what I'm up to, and mostly
I don't know how you do it.
The permo.
Just to check we're still sort of awake, isn't it?
So are you out do you go out every single night? Because that seems like that. Oh my
today's
God.
Today's this is my 93rd.
What's the secret? Barocca? What is it? What is it?
Immortal. Barocca. No, I just it's just that's just my lifestyle, and it started as a kind of running joke thing of being on a permo, and then it was like day 20 odd, and then it was day 50. We're like, right, at 50 we pack it in, and it's just kept going. And actually the 100th day will be the day that I travel down to Hereford the night before Hay on Wye. So But yeah, I don't know. That's like it's work hard, play hard is my kind of lifestyle. I don't really get hungover. I'm more just tired. I can put away red wine like it's water, and I just don't. Yeah, that's my lifestyle. I'm busy and I work all the time, and then at nighttime I'm out. I'm out with other hospital people and working, and then get back up the next day and do it. It's work hard, play hard. So yeah, it's mostly my Instagram is mostly stories. It's me kind of partying, and some of it's professional, some of it's what I'm working on, but most of it is actual.
Well, just you being you,
exactly.
isn't it?
Yeah, me being on it,
and it's absolutely brilliant.
Out in ball gowns. Yeah, Instagram's more personal. It's more like writing and stuff like that, and kind of partying. And Twitter's kind of the more slightly professional, everybody talking to each other thing.
Fascinating because you look like some sort of femme fatale from a film noir sort of thing.
Your photographs are
amazing,
stunning.
A bit heady
girl. They are stunning.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Hedy Lamarr, yeah. I do kind of fall into that. I think merging of two aesthetics, which is usually like 40s kind of femme fatale and or noir, high noir, and then kind of like goth noir vampire. But yeah, I just kind of blended two aesthetics and was like, this is my aesthetic now. But definitely that's why there's a lot of people that kind of didn't know I was a parapsychologist or a writer or whatever, because they just kind of followed based on like 40s fashion and style and things like that, and went, oh wait, you're not a scientist, you do things for the telly. I was like, that's my day job, other than just cutting about drinking red wine and ball.
I think that's brilliant because you've got those two personalities. I think that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. You're a true star. What can we say, Nige?
Honestly, I'm so glad I got to speak to you. I'm a big admirer of what you do. So thank you so much for coming on here and chatting to us. It's no problem at all.
Do come back and talk to us again.
Yeah, can we get you on here again?
Yeah, you're welcome anytime.
Brilliant, thank you so much. I know you're a very busy lady, but we'll nab you further down the line. See how you get on when you've got some new projects under your belt. So, thank you very much, Evelyn Hollow. We'll say goodbye to you from here, and we'll see you again very soon.
Take care.
Thank you. Cheers.
Sure.
No problem. There we go, everyone. Evelyn Hollow.
Thank you for having me.
What can I say?
She's fab, isn't she?
Thank you.
She's an amazing lady.
I'm going to say it now. I do have a soft spot voice. She's lovely.
Well, hey.
But I'm old enough to be a dad, but there we go. So, that's it from us. Take care. We'll see you all again very soon on here. So, thank you for taking the time to listen to us. Thank you very much. Good night.
Goodbye.